You and I bumped into one another yesterday at the gym, and kind of a 1-minute conversation that I want to elaborate on. John Boehner, for those that haven't seen it, Boehner is as comfortable as he's ever been in his life. I mean, he's a very liberated man now. I think he's doing some work on Capitol Hill, but he's not speaker. He's not beholden to the voter or the process or dealing with the parties and the president and all these other sorts of things. He's making money now, I guess, cashing in on being a former speaker and understanding how the sausage is made. But he was posed a question in an interview, and it's a simple question, but I think it's got a complicated answer. And the simple question is the Republican Party today the party of Donald Trump? And I'll pose that question to you, Dr. Kaufman.
Well, first of all, his response was, yeah, there was the Republican Party, and now there's the party of Trump, that there is no Republican Party anymore. And I think if we're looking at the numbers, I think that Boehner's onto something. The Rev and I were talking during the break about a study that just came out on Quartz.com that if you look at people who identify with the Republican Party, Trump has the highest rating among any Republican president in the modern era, with the exception of George W. Bush after 9/11.
And that's after 9/11.
Yeah, exactly.
The nation naturally rallies around a president after something like that happens.
Right. And if you look at things Trump has said and done, whether it be his comments about Mexicans or his comments about groping women or the like, things that in the past I think would have turned Republicans, people who identify as Republicans, away, they shrug and go, well, okay, that's Donald Trump, big deal. What has Donald Trump done for me lately, or what has Donald Trump done that I believe in? And looking at things like his position on immigration, which is supported by many Republicans, looking at the fact that the unemployment rate is down to 3.8%, a low, in 40 years, I believe. Looking at his position on tariffs and fair trade, these are things that many Republicans say, you know what? He may say some things I don't like. He may do some things I don't like. But when it comes down to the bottom line, I like Donald Trump.
Let me ask you a question. When I say the party of Trump, and you know I like that, I know you don't. Well, what do you hear? I mean, what is the party of Trump? And I'm not talking about the attitude. Or is it an attitude? Is the attitude more important than the policies implemented?
This is where I struggle. I think now this is my personal opinion.
Sure.
Again, I think for many of those people who identify as Republicans and who support Trump, what they are looking at is ultimately, what is Donald Trump doing that he said he would do? What is Donald Trump doing that is beneficial to me personally? Is he keeping his promises? And I think many Republicans are supporting him because they believe he does keep his promises. Even evangelicals you think would turn against Trump are saying, well, but he's keeping his promises. The fact that unemployment is so low, I think, is for a lot of people something they go, well, you know what? For all of his faults, look what he's doing for this country. For my fear, and I've talked about this in the show before, my fear is that people are overlooking what I see as a very grave danger. And that is, I see in Donald Trump someone, and I'm not the one who said this, I see in Donald Trump someone who is willing to move this country down a path toward authoritarianism, a path away from democracy. And I fear that people are so willing to support him, whether it be because of the promises or the economy or just because they hate the establishment or because they believe in the deep state, that they're willing to accept a group of policies and accept a person who is moving us down that dangerous path.
But, Scott, don't you agree that history is littered with periods of time when the status quo fails? You use the word establishment. I'll use the word status quo. We're talking about the same group of people, both Republican and Democrat. When people get to a point of not trusting nor believing the people that are supposed to be looking after their best listeners are, don't we always go to a strong man? I mean, doesn't history show us episode after episode all over the world, not just in American history, but all over the world, when the status quo fails, when people become so detached from a group of elites or permanentists or careerists or, whatever, bureaucrats, that we always go to a strong man?
I wouldn't say always. Look at the American Revolution. The status quo for many Americans had failed. They didn't turn to a strong man. They turned to a Republican, small r, form of democracy. we have seen it happen, absolutely, whether it be in Germany or in France or elsewhere. But it doesn't always happen. And what I'm fearing is that there are people in this country who are prepared to accept the idea of someone who believes in the strong man.
So that strikes fear in you about Donald Trump. That's something that concerns you deeply long term about the Republican Party being, quote unquote, the party of Trump, a party that embraces this sort of idea or principle. What do you think Trump's done that has allowed for him to garner a higher level of support over the past 500 days? You and I were talking. There's a couple of approval ratings now that have him around 50%. His RCP average is actually about 45 or somewhere there. About. What do you attribute that to?
I think part of it is that, and I'll freely admit this, I think Trump is learning. His negotiations with North Korea, I think people who want to see denuclearization take place believe that Donald Trump, by taking that strong position against North Korea, got North Korea to back down. China, by taking the strong position on tariffs, the Chinese are willing to make concessions to the United States, and that by taking the strong position against Canada, Mexico, and the EU, Trump can get them to make concessions as well that will allow for fairer trade. His position on immigration, the fact that the economy is showing this rebound and that the unemployment rate is so low, the fact that he is keeping, as far as his supporters believe, that he is keeping his promises. So I think there's a variety of things out there that explain what this Quartz.com study and lead Americans to say, for all the things he's done that I don't like, I'm willing to put those aside because I like more what he is doing.
But has he changed normal? In other words, there was a long period of time we wondered whether or not he would change, whether he would become more like a normal president. He has not. I mean, he has not. Have we warmed up to that idea? We were fearful of that. Even the supporters of Trump were a little bit nervous as to how he'd behave as president. He's still behaving kind of like he did when he ran for office. But to your point, he's learning the way that world works. That's to his credit. But how much have we began to become accustomed to this new normal?
Well, I've said on the show that I think that he is now become part of the establishment. I think that there's still a Republican Party out there, but it's now the Trumpublicans, as I've seen one media outlet call it. It's just that the Republican Party is willing to support this guy because they see more benefits in doing so than they see benefits in opposing him. How much this has become the new normal? I think part of it is that Americans are willing to put aside decorum and morality in favor of these other issues, which they see as more pressing or of greater concern to them. Whether that continues is anybody's guess. If, let's say, for instance, the tariffs prove harmful to the U.S. economy and we begin to see the U.S. go into a recession or at least begin to see something of an economic downturn, then we could see a revolt against Trump of some level or another. And that could see things swinging in another direction. But,
Scott, what do the Democrats run on in the midterms? I mean, you can't run against Trump now because his approvals aren't 31 or 2. They're back in normal areas. And Trump will never be a 60% approval rating sort of president. That's just the way he is. That's his demeanor. That's his attitude. That's his approach. He'll never be the most popular president ever. He is very popular amongst Republican primary voters today. I would argue that a lot of the strategy employed by the Democrats, and that is Russia collusion, obstruction of justice, the unsavory characters that Trump associated himself with, is beginning to wear thin. And the majority of Republicans support Trump. The majority of Democrats don't. But the universe of independents have become more familiar with the way this guy conducts his business. And I believe when you look at the RCP, you know, the generic Republican, generic Democrat, you look at the general elections, you look at the number of independents that'll vote in these generals. That's why I believe there's a reason to be optimistic. If you are a fan of Donald Trump, the average guy, the average lady, the person not listening to Good Morning PD, not watching, you know, from MSNBC to Fox and back to MSNBC, back to Fox, back to MSNBC, the person watching Seinfeld, that they're beginning to say, hey, man, I've heard for 300 days Trump and Russia. There's been no proof. There's been no evidence. How much? I mean, I'm going to move on to something else. Do you agree that that is very much to Trump's advantage and the Republicans' advantage as we head to the midterms?
Well, look at the numbers right now. If we looked, a month or two ago, it appeared that Democrats had a very good shot of gaining a fairly sizable majority in the House of Representatives.
Which is fairly historic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way history plays.
Right.
A first-term president of that party normally gets his butt handed to him in the midterms.
But MSNBC, liberal outlet, is saying now that if everything goes the Democrats' way, it looks like that it'll probably be 219 seats in the House, which is only one beyond the majority that they need. So that is not a good sign for Democrats. Plus, we've talked about in the show, and I'm agreeing with it more and more, Trump is doing a phenomenal job of using the media to his advantage. He knows how to get the soundbite. He knows how to keep the media talking about him, talking about this investigation that he says has proven nothing. And given those two things, just those two things right there, I think there is evidence that Americans are going, all right, fine. Mueller is planning on, from my understanding, submitting his report by September. He wants to get it out well before the midterm elections, so there's no talk of political impropriety here. Whether he does that, I don't know. I think it would probably be a good thing if he gets it out and we see what happens. And then, as we've talked about in the show, let's see what the evidence shows.
Is Donald Trump a better president than you thought he'd be?
I think he is proving to be a better person when it comes to understanding how to use politics and the media to his advantage. In terms of person, no.